Yes, thanks to Sinn Féin for bringing forward this important motion. Profiteering is the problem, Minister. It's really as simple as that. And when you look at grocery prices up by 17%, an estimated increased cost of €1,200 for the average household, that is additional profit that is being made by somebody else. And I think we all know who are making the profits. It's the big supermarkets, the big supermarket chains, the big wholesalers, the big meat processors. Their profits are going through the roof, while ordinary people are crucified with unsustainable increases in the cost of groceries. And that reflects the more general problem that we are facing with the cost of living crisis. While ordinary people, households, workers are seeing dramatic cuts in their real income, the corporate sector has enjoyed an absolute bonanza. And that's the elephant in the room that the government doesn't want to acknowledge, but the facts speak for themselves. And of course, when the figures, when they're discussed, which is rarely enough for corporate profits, the figures are so fantastic that they kind of seem abstract to people. But they are real, and they are absolutely incredible. I'm a nerd in this regard. I study these corporate profits, maybe because I'm on the Budget Scrutiny Committee. But the increase in corporate profits in this country is beyond belief. It's absolutely staggering. In the last quarter of 2022, last year, just in the last quarter, profits for the entire corporate sector in this country were €80 billion. That was up from 10 years previously, when the profits for the entire year in 2012 were €80 billion. So we've had pretty much, we don't have the total figure for 2022, but more or less we are talking about a quadrupling of corporate profits in a decade. Now, the income of ordinary workers has been cut over the last 2 years. The real buying power based on the wages and salaries of ordinary workers has been cut, but profits have gone through the roof. So what the inflation crisis, so-called, is, it is a transfer of wealth. It is as plain as day. As prices go up, the energy companies make a fortune, the corporate landlords make a fortune, the supermarket chains make a fortune, the REITs and the vulture funds make a fortune, the big manufacturers make an absolute fortune, and ordinary people get whacked. Whacked to the point for 671,000 of people in this country living in poverty. And of course, even the figure of, in terms of inflated grocery costs of 1,200 masks the reality for working people, because they spend a much higher proportion of their income on food and indeed on energy, all the things that have gone up, or on housing. So if the average figure is 1,200 across the population, you are talking about at least 2,000, if not 3,000 euro in increased cost just to put food on the table. And then you add to that the increase in energy costs, then you add to that the increase in rents or accommodation or mortgage, however most ordinary people are paying for the roof over their head. People are getting crucified. But if you're somebody who's got surplus money, if you're rich, and you can buy shares in the Bank of Ireland, in some private energy company, in Tesco's, in some meat processing company, you can sit back and just watch the dividends roll in. You can watch the profits just rising. You can watch the value of your assets and your balance sheet just improving. That's what's going on. There are tens of thousands of very rich people in this country who are sitting back and they are getting richer from all of this. And they are doing nothing to earn it. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. They go to their stockbroker and say, what should I invest my excess wealth in? Our stockbroker tells them where the profits are to be made. That's all they have to do. And they get richer and richer and richer. And then when some of us come along and say, maybe we should consider putting a cap on the profits of these companies. Maybe we should consider putting maximum prices on what they can charge per kilowatt hour, or what they can charge for a basic basket of basic food items and groceries, or that we should put caps on rents. There's gasps. You couldn't possibly do that. No, it couldn't possibly do that. It's economic lunacy. It's madness. It's not even worth considering. It's so crazy. But why? Why is it so crazy? To cap the profits that are being made by these companies, to put maximum prices on the things they are charging people who are being literally impoverished and who are being driven into a financially and economically unsustainable situation, and in many cases driven into outright poverty. Outright poverty. And their children being driven into outright poverty. And a very significant portion of them being actually driven into a situation where they have no roof over their head at all. I mean, it's a stain on any decent civilized society, or any society that calls itself one, and we do, but yet we allow this to happen. And we're told we can't do these things. We've been calling for maximum price caps on the use of the Consumer Protection Act, which is there in law. When there is an emergency in the supply and cost of certain goods, the government has the power. It's in laws that were not even written by the left, but were written by the government more than a decade ago to cap prices. If it was considered a reasonable thing to put in legislation more than a decade ago, why is it that you are now saying it can't be done? Of course it can be done. The other irony I just have to comment on briefly was Deputy Richmond's comments about, and don't forget about the war in Ukraine, and how that's contributed to all of this. I read a very, very good report today by the Transnational Institute about the profiteering that's going on in the arms industry. You know, and again, like, this sort of Orwellian logic of this just sickens me. The amount of money that is being spent in Europe is on military expenditure, on arms and weapons and means to kill people, is increasing absolutely dramatically. And as their report explained very, very well, all of that was happening well in advance of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There has been a sustained push to increase expenditure on arms and weapons. And the truth is, every dollar or euro or whatever the currency is that is spent on creating weapons to kill people, to end people's lives, is money that is not put in to housing and health and education and eliminating poverty and eliminating inequality. That is the truth. But yet the government just doesn't want to acknowledge it. So, you know, I think probably it's all falling on deaf ears, because I think the government and the main parties in the government think it is acceptable. They think it is acceptable to operate in an economy where poverty is increasing, where the cost of putting food on the table is becoming unsustainable, where people are homeless and so on. But we can't go too far. I'm not saying you don't want to address it at all, but we can't go too far in addressing it if it upsets the people who want to go down to the stockbroker and invest in the companies who are making profits. That's the reality of it. And if that isn't true, do it. Because you can do it, you have the legal power to do it, and you certainly have the moral obligation to do it. When people are having to make choices between food on the table for their children, or heating, turning on the heating when it's cold, or being able to pay the rent to keep the roof over their head.
Deputy Sean